All right. Hi, everybody. How's it going? A couple of years ago, when we would have this type of a talk, it would usually be about, like, why games and, how are games valid? And no, really, games are important. And it's exciting because we're kind of past that now. And now the talks that we have are a little bit more like how games, like how do we do this? How do you build a good one? What do you do when your organization is thinking about building a game and is not exactly sure how to do it? So I'm going to sort of kick it off a little bit. We have boiled it down to some design principles that we think have worked for all of our different organizations. And I'll do a quick overview, hand it over to these guys. We'll all talk for maybe about 10, 15 minutes, and then we will have you guys working on an activity afterwards. In the meantime, all of you have games around you. Feel free to fiddle as you're listening and tweet lots. We love tweeting. So we'll get started. So for those of you who don't know me, hello. My name is Kellian, and I work with an organization called Green Door Labs. And Green Door Labs has been building games at museums for maybe about 5, 6 years now, which actually is about as long as there have been games, like, formally being done in museums. When I first started, it was a lot of like, what, games in museums? We don't do that. That's ridiculous. So Green Door Labs is an independent organization, and we've worked with a lot of different types of organizations. So museums and universities, nonprofits, libraries, after-school programs. So a lot of different places that we have made games with. And everybody needs a different type of result. And so we try to be super flexible. EF was a really interesting game. They hired us on. We really want a game. No, actually, you don't want a game. What they needed was something totally different. They didn't realize it until they really sat down and took a look at their systems. Sometimes it's something that's really simple that we can fix quickly. Sometimes it's something where we need to work with them for an entire design process. So, show off, right? Who cares? No, there actually is a reason why I'm telling you this. And this is because since we've done games with so many different museums and organizations, we've seen a lot of patterns emerge. So we've seen a lot of things that have happened again and again. And so I'm going to talk a little bit less about my projects and a little bit more about the patterns that we've seen working with you guys for your projects. So this is usually what happens. So somebody will come to our office and they'll be like, we want a game, and it's going to be like Angry Birds, and it's going to be like Sim City, and it's going to be awesome, and 1 million people are going to play. And we're like, okay, all right. Oh, but we don't have any money, right? Oh my God, what a surprise. A nonprofit institution doesn't have any money, right? Nobody has any money, like always. And so we say to them, okay, listen, we have bad news for you. SimCity, Angry Birds, these are games that are AAA games. These games cost, anywhere between $500,000 to a couple of $1 million to produce. These are expensive games. These are wildly expensive games. And so then they're left with a couple options. So they can either they can wait until the perfect situation presents itself where they're given this landfall, tons and tons of money. Yay, we have $3 million. Let's build Angry Birds, right? Or maybe you have somebody who is your development person, and you're like, okay, we're sending you on a mission. Go raise money. We're going to get this $1 million so that we can make our Sim City. But then there's option C, which is the one that I always recommend, which is work with what you have. You've got $20 and a roll of duct tape. Do it, right? You can make a game with $20 and a roll of duct tape. Because what is the best game? It's the one that you're able to build, right? So whatever you have, use it to build something rather than kind of sitting around and waiting for the perfect opportunity to present itself. Because honestly, even the largest institutions with the most resources still seldom have the perfect opportunity for building a game. There's still never the perfect storm for building your Angry Birds. So I like to boil it down to these 3 systems when I'm talking to organizations about building games. So first we say, all right, what are your goals? What are your resources? And what are your restrictions? And it's a really easy way to start the design process for me, because it really makes people focus their thought process. So, for instance, goals. I'm a teacher, and I was a full-time teacher before I started being a full-time game builder. So I always think in terms of a classroom. What do I want out of this classroom? And in fact, with games, it's even more specific than that, because people are going to do whatever you ask them to do, right? Whereas where you send them into an exhibit, there's some quiet time. Maybe people can come up with their own conclusions. If they play a game, if you ask them to jump up and down and press this button for the next 30 seconds, they'll do it. So you need to know why you're asking them to press that button for 30 seconds. And there has to be a really good pedagogical reason why you want them to press that button for 30 seconds. And if not, then get it out of your game, right? You need to have very specific goals on what you want to achieve. Resources. Really, it's important to sit down and be like, okay, what do we got? List them out. And usually the most important resources are the ones that seem the least obvious, right? Maybe you have things like interns, or maybe you have a really good partnership. Restrictions, best to think about them ahead of time, right? Don't wait until you've already built up and then, oh, actually we're working with kids and there are COPPA regulations, therefore none of this can be on social media. Oh well, right? You want to think of all your strict restrictions ahead of time before you build. So I figured I'd take a minute and go through some of the really common goals, resources, and restrictions that I've seen working with a lot of different museums across the country. So, number one, goals. Are you a good girl or a bad girl? All right, so it is possible, in fact, it is probable even sometimes, to have really bad game goals, right? So I know when I sit down with somebody and their goals are vague and they're open to interpretation and I can't talk them out of that, then we may be toast, because that is really the most important thing. So these are the game goals. Watch out, right? Sometimes game goals start here, and that's okay, but make sure they don't end here. So if you're sitting down with your administration and they're like, oh, but Angry Birds was so successful and my kids love games. So what are your game goals? Well, kids love games. No, that is not a game goal, right? If we say, we just want them to have fun, it's like, oh gosh, well then, send them outside in a sandbox if all you want them to do is have fun. You're trying to do something else if you're bringing them into your institution and putting the time, the effort into giving them something that's interactive. So nail down your institution on their goals. Maybe they are learning goals. Maybe they're not. Sometimes learning goals are like, we need a lot of press. We need something that is going to show that we are using this type of technology. We want to show off our Wi-Fi. We want to show something that says we are doing something for this demographic, right? So good goals, the fairy goals that I really like, I like specific goals, granular goals, things that are measurable and repeatable, and most importantly, goals that let you know when you've succeeded. Because when you set it out and then you do it, how do you know if you won, right? It's like a game, right? How do I know if I won this game of building a game? You gotta set that up ahead of time. So some good goals that I've seen that really were successful, things like take 10 pictures, look closely at art for 1 hour, label 100 photographs, experience what it might feel like to be an X, right? Express a museum's values or goals. These are very specific things that we want to do. We know when we've done it, we know when we haven't done it. Resources. So, you have lots of resources. You're a museum, you've got all sorts of stuff, and sometimes the resources are not necessarily what you see right in front of you. Sometimes they're hidden resources. Some of the most useful resources that I've seen in museums are their people, right? You're a museum. Everybody wants to work with you. You're awesome. You've got cool stuff. You're often in a beautiful building. So use that. Go out to your local 4-H or your Girl Scouts or your startup community. Use meetups. Ask for help. See who it is who's willing to partner with you. I'm always shocked that people are like, oh, we want a game. Oh, we have zero technology. We have no Wi-Fi, nobody knows how to use any of these systems, well, we can't build a game. Of course you can build a game. People have been building analog games since the beginning of time, right? I mean, games have been used to engage people since there have been people. And there are lots of beautiful, wonderful games that are really working in museums that have absolutely no technology to them at all. There's a huge board game resurgency that's happening right now. Board game nights are happening left and right. It started with Settlers of Catan. Everybody's got a board game night now. Build a board game, or just have a board game night at your museum, right? Don't forget that there's all sorts of stuff that you can do with paper and pen. If you want to see an organization that's really doing a good job with that, ping Gore Place. Gore Place is doing great stuff with analog games right now. One of the things that they did that I love, they've got this huge space, and they didn't know how to get people around this huge space, so they gave people backpacks. And they're like, okay, take the backpack, don't open it till you get outside. That's a game. You know, you go outside, it's a secret, you open the backpack, oh, it's a thing, and I have to find this, and I have to find that. I mean, these cost you $30. They bought the whole thing at Costco. American Textile History Museum is actually building some games right now. They're just at the beginning stages, but they're also building really wonderful things. So, you know, keep an eye on them for things that are happening in the world of analog. Platforms. Platforms are such a resource. Developers do not build things from scratch. No developer worth their salt ever decides to start a project with a blank screen, right? They have Stack Overflow. They have all of their systems. They're pulling code from each other. Why shouldn't we? Right? These are all existing platforms that will let us build just with our existing tech abilities, right? The Adventure Builder, all you have to do is type. Scratch is drag and drop for video games. Game Salad takes some logic, but you can pretty much learn it in a day. I've done a workshop with teenagers that learned how to program games in Scratch in a week. Totally reasonable. Torsphere, drag and drop, really straightforward. Eris, what was the Minnesota play history game was entirely built off of Eris. In fact, they worked with Eris, and Eris modified their platform for this museum. Again, resources, you know, they're the Minnesota History Museum. So they're like, hey, we need X, and Eris is like, we're on it, you know, and they fix it for them. Torsphere, Murder at the Met was built off of the platform Torsphere. So don't try and start from the very beginning. Use these existing resources. Restrictions, they always apply. I know there's all sorts of things that you can't do, which is good, because if you can do everything, then you're overwhelmed with possibilities. But make sure you write them all down and think about them. There are always ways to work around them. But the only thing that I've actually seen completely derail games is the two qualities of the people that want to build them. Either if you're a defeatist, oh, I can't do it. Oh, no, we'll never be able to do it. Oh, no, sorry. We've got this and this and this. Oh, it's not possible. It's always possible, right? You can always do something. Or if you're not flexible, right? We need Angry Birds. It has to be Portal. If it's not Portal, it's nothing, right? Well, okay, good luck. You're going to be waiting a long time for your game. But in general, these are the only two things that I've really ever seen that are going to totally derail your process. So now we're going to tell you about 3 different organizations that created some really great stuff. And I challenge you, as you're sitting down, to sort of parse out the goals, resources, and restrictions that each of these organizations had and had to overcome in order to build some really great interactive projects. So onwards to great adventures. So I am at Green Door Labs. Please email me anytime. I love to talk about games and play and interactive stuff. knock@greendoorlabs.com. And I will pass it on.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Marjee Chmiel, and I'm from the Smithsonian Science Education Center. We are an outreach center of the Smithsonian, and we do formal education, which is why I titled my presentation Museum Games for When You Are Not. So just a quick background, the Smithsonian Institution is comprised of 19 museums, research centers, and other things. So we are one of these other things. As I mentioned, we're the only unit of Smithsonian that deals exclusively in formal education, so that means kids in schools. Particularly, we do kindergarten through 8th grade science education. And our unit falls under the, I have to look at it because I always forget, the Assistant Secretary's Office for Education and Access. And I mention that because that's sort of an important reason behind why we decided to start working on games. So first, one of our goals, one of the reasons we started doing games is, kind of one of the goals that Kellian mentioned is a bad goal, but it was an expectation that our audience had had. So we've been doing science education for nearly 30 years, and at this point, this has become an expectation among our parents, teachers, and the children that we work with. But the other goal is that it was in direct response to sort of the mission of the Office of Education and Access. So the idea being Smithsonian is a national museum. We do belong to everybody in the country and in the world. But for a lot of people, we're a place that is visited maybe once in a lifetime on a family trip or a sixth grade field trip. And our assistant secretary, Claudine Brown, one of her missions is to change that and to make it a place where no matter where you are in the country or how frequently or infrequently you get a chance to visit, you feel some ownership and kinship with the collections at Smithsonian. And so even though our unit is a formal education unit and we're not a museum in and of ourselves, we do consider ourselves part of that greater mission. And of course, that sort of ties into a comment that I had heard on an outreach excursion in October in Louisiana where I was presenting to high school students. And one student bravely asked me, as I was getting introduced, can you please explain to me what is Smithsonian? Which I thought was a very good question, was really happy that he asked that question. But it's certainly part of the reason that we know that this is an important mission, is to start finding ways for digital outreach. So let's see. So I'll start with a couple of our resources, and then what I want to do is parse through our challenges and how this particular game design was meant to address those. So first, one of the most important resources is that we are in a lot of schools. So we've got access to hundreds of thousands of students around the country and a couple of international spots. So we do have a wide network of educators. So we have people that we can reach out to once we develop a resource that, again, they've sort of been looking to us to develop for a while. We did have a budget, which is nice, and Smithsonian also offers something called Youth Access Grants, which will match any funds that we had raised. So, of course, that was incredibly useful. The other thing is that we've had experience developing learning games before, so I came to Smithsonian with several years and titles under my belt and worked with a set of a vendor that I'd worked with a lot in the past. And so this is something that we had done a couple of times and had some experience in this area. The other thing that I think is incredibly important is that we did have support from the top. So from the secretary to the assistant secretary to our executive director and our advisory board, this is something that a lot of people wanted to see happen, and so they were behind us all the way. And then, of course, we had other Smithsonian units that we could sort of look to help us for content and to help promote the game once it came out. So the challenges that we faced are, first, as I mentioned, we're not a museum, so we don't have cool stuff. I work in an office building. We don't have anything that is inherently, we don't have cool collections to show off. And so when we think about how to extend what Smithsonian offers, we do need to look at a content partner. The other thing, and this is sort of addresses a little bit what we had in the description for this session, is that we actually do have to adhere to learning standards. Again, because we are formal education, it's the only way to get into the classroom. So we do have to adhere to learning standards, and we need to be integrated with a curriculum. That's a challenge and it's a restriction, but I also have always found it to be a really wonderful set of guidelines that do inform design, because it does kind of give you some rails to follow. So I would call that a resource as well as a challenge. The other thing that was a real problem is that when I got brought on, that we didn't have much of a tech presence, meaning we kind of had a website that would make Angel Fire websites look good and glamorous. It was in a very sad state. We had, the only social media platform we had when I got there was that sad little Twitter egg with like 2 spam bot followers or something. So I mean, we essentially didn't exist on the web. And when you're talking about making a digital game, that's a problem. So the game that we ended up developing, and it launched about a month ago, is called Shutterbugs, Wiggle and Stomp. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the game and then a little bit about why we think that it met some of these challenges that I had just laid out for you. So basically, the premise of Shutterbugs is that you're visiting the animals at the Smithsonian National Zoo. You're taking a picture of the animals performing certain motions. So this is aligned with the kindergarten learning standard where it's under the forces in motion, sort of like the physics category. And when you're 5, the thing that you're learning about physics is just how to describe certain motions. So that's literally what it is. So wiggling, stomping, marching, running, whatever. Describing what motions look like, getting that vocabulary down. And so in the game, there's a little zookeeper named Ada, and she tells you, find the animal that's flying, and you get to see different animals. You take a picture of the flying animal. Once you get the animal right a couple of times, you unlock the ability to print a little coloring page of it. And you've also, we've built it so that it's responsive to the child. So the more a child is struggling, the kind of easier it is. The more a child is mastering it, we do some things to get a little tricksy to make it difficult. So it scales a little bit in difficulty because there are such a wide variety of skills and abilities at that age. It's available on iPad, Android, and the web. It's for free on all of those platforms. As I mentioned, it's got the coloring pages for parents that don't like the kids to spend too much time on screen time. There's still an activity for the child to engage with. It supports multiple players, so a single app will support up to 3 independent saved games. And again, we're thinking about multi-child households or classroom use in that case. There's also a printable certificate and a progress report that would go to a teacher or a parent. As I mentioned, the target age is ages 3 to 5. And this was just sort of a personal thing for me, is that I was overtly interested in working specifically with the needs of English language learners and early literacy, because that is a huge priority, we know, to a lot of teachers at that age. No, the teachers aren't that age, the kids are. Okay, all right. But you never know. All right. But so obviously the first thing that we had to do was kind of build a website that people would want to go to that functioned in the year 2013 as it should. So that took up a lot of our time, actually, with sort of getting things from the ground up, building a new website on a content management system called MySI. That's something that we've developed at Smithsonian. We also worked a lot on building a social media presence so that when we started developing things, we could tell people about it and they would know, because it would be on the web. And so we started working through infographics to do a better job of representing sort of what we do visually, as well as talking about why we thought technology was an important component of where we were going for the next couple of years. So having a website helped. The other thing is that my boss sort of came to me and said, you should make a game, and I said, great. And then that was the only instruction that he gave me. So I sort of selected to start with kindergarten, because we actually historically have worked strictly with grades 1 through 8, and we were starting to launch a brand new kindergarten curriculum. So I figured, since we weren't known for kindergarten and we weren't known for games, let's bring 2 things that people don't know that we do and be like, hey guys, look, we were doing both of these things. And so that's what we did, and it was actually a neat opportunity too, because as we were designing the game, we were designing the kindergarten cover, so we were able to take Ada from the game and put her into the curriculum and kind of act like we've been doing this all along. Like, yeah, we've always been making games and having a decent website. And the other thing, of course, that we did is work with a content partner, and so we approached the National Zoo and said, can we sort of have, represent your animals in this game? And so we kind of recreated the front gate of the National Zoo for the game, and then also included a little map in the game that was based on the real zoo map, so that if you were to take this into the zoo, you could more or less find your way around. And then, of course, the animals that we used in the game were based on the actual animals in the collection, which was neat. I never really thought about what animals were or weren't in the National Zoo, because I think I really needed a giraffe to do something, but there aren't any giraffes. We had naked mole rats, and the kids really liked that one. The other thing, of course, that we did was we did exhaustive user testing. And I will tell you something, that if you are a parent with a child this age and you happen to have a tablet in your house, you won't be surprised. But we were all floored, because we brought laptops in to user test the games. And these poor children had no idea what to do with a laptop, because you know what I'm going to say, right? They all went straight for the screen and started swiping the screen. And then we were told by their teacher that when you have physical books in front of these kids, a lot of them will swipe the book and click on pictures in the book. So, so we had Max with the sort of awkward mouse pad and everything, and these poor children were troopers. And we had to sort of teach them how to use the laptop to navigate the game. So we learned, and then we started doing user testing on the tablets, and that went much more smoothly. But that was a really important experience for us because that's something that's changed so much just in the last couple of years that we weren't really anticipating that. And my 20-year-old intern said she felt old. The other thing is we had to think a lot through supporting emerging literacy because from ages 3 to 5, the reading levels range so much. So some parents might, or teachers might want to use this to develop children that are already reading, and so we sort of had to make the narration very very responsive, so you could sort of turn down Ada so that she's not reading aloud to you, or have her reading support. We've got the sort of words that would highlight, as well as things that you would click on so that if a child needed words repeated to them, that would be responsive and on demand. And so a lot of work needed to be done around there. The other thing that was very tricky for us is that we developed this and published it simultaneously on the web, Android, and the iPad. So there was no difference in how we designed those three, the three different platforms, which meant that we couldn't do things like, say, click on the arrow, because you would click on the web, but you certainly wouldn't do that. And we also, likewise, wouldn't want to, say, touch the arrow. So we sort of had to think through that sort of thing, because, again, we had enough of a budget to simultaneously publish all three, but not enough to distinguish between the three different platforms. The other thing, too, of course, is thinking about how we can make sure that play is not necessarily constrained to the game and to the screen time. And so this was an experiment. I've never tried anything like this before, but we made the sort of little printable sheets of the animals, and really heard back from parents that this has gone really well. Kids seem to really enjoy it. So this is a blogger that was sharing some pictures of his daughter using using that particular feature to color, and she would use the animals in the game as reference art, and then she would hang them around her bunk bed to make her own little zoo. And so far, the response to the game has been very good. We've had brisk downloads. It's slowing down now, but it's been about 1,000 downloads a week, which we're very happy with, as well as the additional plays that we've gotten on the website. We've gotten positive response from parents, teachers, and kids, and we're looking forward to doing more of this. We recently debuted this at the Smithsonian Teachers Night, and did hear from a lot of teachers that they were eager to use this with their English language learners, which I was excited to hear. Go away, performance alert. And in terms of, and I'm sharing, this is a quote that Barry Joseph, who is from the American Natural History Museum in New York, had shared on his blog, because he was saying that when he found this to be a really good tool to play with his kids, and then they went to the Bronx Zoo over the weekend, and he found that their sort of understanding and response to the animals was incredibly enthusiastic. And I think this is an interesting conversation for me to have someone that works exclusively in outreach when I talk about games with folks in museums, because it does sort of bring up the idea of kind of what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a game that can be played on site versus what are the components that maybe you would want people to take and play at home to then later on bring to the museum during their visit. And obviously, I think there are ways that the two different approaches to designing games can be sort of played against each other to maximize the visitor's experience. But for the time being, I think it's sort of a question that we're still exploring and learning about. So that's it. That's just our information. Like I said, the game is available on the web, so if you've got a laptop, you can go straight over there. Otherwise, it's free on both Android and iTunes stores.
Is there a toggle on?
Oh, yeah, here, I'll talk about
Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Masha Turchinsky from the Metropolitan Museum. I'm over here on this side, the Mac person here. I'm going to talk about games as well, but I'm going to cite 3 specific examples from the Metropolitan. Also frame it in terms of resources and restrictions and lessons learned. And I've intentionally picked 2 games, 2 mobile or digital media games, and then 1 analog game. And I hope that what it does for you is sparks a conversation of which elements might fit with your own institution if you are considering games in your museum. So I would say first things first, I'm not going to talk about gamifying the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and that is, while I really appreciate games, that's not all I do, and certainly that is not all the Metropolitan Museum of Art does. On any given day, we've got performances, studio programs, family programs, the list goes on, school groups and tours. We've got people looking for bathrooms, a lot. We've got millions of online visitors. We've really lost people looking for dinosaurs. That's heartbreaking. You have to send them across the way. Scholars Day. So there's a lot going on in the museum, and what the game should be about is not trying to gamify all of these activities, but try to think about what are the best opportunities to reach out to audiences and connect with them in a logical way. So for me, games at the Metropolitan are about curiosity and experimentation, options, and audiences. I am personally curious, and I think a lot of our audiences are as well, about what does the Met have inside of it? What is the Metropolitan Museum of Art? Whether you're coming for the very first time or you're coming for the 30th time, what does the Met have for me? And how can games make them different? Experimentation, in the sense that I'm still in a place of trying tools and seeing what works and being willing to modify when it doesn't. Options, again, to me, games are great. They're a great entry point. I think they're a great way to spark conversations. They're a great way for a visitor to experience a part of the museum in a way that they had not before or even thought about or even considered. And in terms of audiences, I will say, I think for those of you who already follow games, you'll know that the App Store, the games area of the App Store is not only the most trafficked area of the App Store, but if you're thinking about profit, it is the highest revenue generator in the App Store. Our audiences are learning outside of museums using games more and more, and this is just something that I think they come to expect, at least as a possibility. And it's also about fun. It's about fun. So I never want to forget that also games really, they offer an opportunity to have a fun interaction with the Met, whether you're in the gallery or if we're catching you off-site. And I have to think about that off-site audience a lot because we have a lot of physical visitors. Last year, the Met probably had about 6.3, 6.4 visitors walk through the doors. But that number is dwarfed by the number of online visits. And I try to remember, what is it like to be in San Francisco or Tokyo or London, and how would you like to know the Met? And I think games offer a really interesting entry point. I also have to think about this. This came home in my daughter's folder 2 weeks ago, and I was stunned. Not only that she managed to fit her long, hyphenated, Slavic, waspy name on the form, but also, so I burdened her with that, but also that she said when she grows up she wants to be a museum professor. And I was really kind of stunned by that. When I asked her that, first of all, get a load of that outfit, right? I mean, just the shoes. But really, when I asked her a little bit about that, because I was stunned, but she said that for her, when I said, well, why a museum professor? She doesn't know what a curator is, but a museum professor is close. She knows it's not exactly a teacher, but she said it's that because museums are really fun, and I get to go around, and I can see a lot of things, and I can have a lot of fun there. And I thought, I don't want to ever have, I think we all started out, or many of us started that way of thinking about museums as fun places. And fun doesn't always mean quiet contemplative moments or solitude. So I think games, again, offer another option. This is what I ask myself, and I think, actually I ask myself probably many more questions as I go through the game. Very often, how did I get myself into this? But one of them is, who is the game for? Who's your audience? What's your goal? What do you want to do with your audience in the museum or in your museum program or in this museum interaction? How will a game specifically help you reach that goal? Because there's a lot of other ways you could reach them. So is a game the best tool here? What's the story? Or if there's no story, what's the framework? And how will you play it? Is this an analog game? Does it involve paper? Does it involve kinetic movement? Is it on a mobile device? And not only how will you make it, but how will you sustain it? It's one thing to get a game up and running, and it's another one with anything. We know this in technology, from websites to apps. It's one thing to make it, and it's another to sustain it. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Murder at the Met, and just tell you about some goals. Now, I really appreciate this project because it really came from a conversation with educator Alice Schwartz in the education department of the Metropolitan Museum. And Alice was thinking about a couple of things. She was thinking about the American Wing galleries at the time were in the process of reinstallation. And she was charged with thinking about something for teens. And so she was contemplating how to introduce teens to the new American Wing galleries, the newly reinstalled galleries. And her goals were she wanted to introduce them to not only the galleries, but also have them engage with original works of art. And she was also wanted to create an enjoyable social experience in an unexpected way. So these were her goals. And so she started out thinking about, she came to me and she said she was thinking about a one-night event with paper, and I think she even mentioned, or somebody mentioned a dreaded QR code at some point. And, but she wanted to create a murder mystery, and she just thought, oh, it's all about Madame X. And for those of you who recognize, John Singer Sargent's Madame X, she is one of the most iconic portraits in the Metropolitan's galleries. And she's kind of got a very glamorous but sort of dark history, and Alice thought, oh, she would be the perfect person to murder off. A little haughty, and so she wanted to create this original detective story based on a fictitious murder that happens in 1899 in the Met's galleries. And the idea was that the works of art would come alive and everything. You had to sort of suspend disbelief because the other portraits in the room would act as alibis or would or provide clues to enhance suspicion, but not just portraits. They could have been objects from the decorative art collection. The murder spaces were the period rooms, so it was a way to think about how else could we think about period rooms other than just stationary, static places with chairs and tables. But what if it was the scene of a murder? And then she wanted teens to collaborate, problem solve, and again, it was a one-night thing. And so when I heard this plan, I thought, oh my God, Alice, this is too good a game to just do for one night, and also I don't know if it should just be for teens. So yes, it was, her funding and her program was to get teens excited. So what we started to do was, I said it should be a game, and this is when, so Alice and I started thinking, what could this be, and we brought Green Door Labs into the picture, who helped us pull together this idea of making it into something that could be played on a mobile device, bring in the content management system, and we really came up with something that was inspired by the classic board game Clue. Also, for me, in terms of game theory, it was inspired by theorists such as James Paul Gee and Henry Jenkins. The idea of games should be pleasantly frustrating. There's no good game is easy the first time to master and be done. That's not a satisfying game. And Henry Jenkins, I was inspired by for the idea of the collaborative nature of learning in institutions and through technology. So here's a trailer. It sums it up pretty nicely. So that's the trailer we released on the website and sent out to a bunch of teens. And the idea was that in terms of design, in terms of resources, what I'll say is this. We had the American Wing Department, which some might have considered maybe more conservative even than other departments. They do have, if anyone knows those galleries, they did venture out and put in gallery technology to better understand the period rooms. So the head of the department said, yes, try it, go ahead, and we're okay with you making up this fictional story about our works. And we also had internal content makers, and we had internal designers. But we didn't have a lot of time, and we did not have a lot of money, I will say that. in terms of game design, it was inspired by the 19th century police blotters there, and so all of the objects get a suspect profile. So everything becomes a suspect or a witness. As I mentioned, the crime scenes, period rooms turn into crime scenes. Who, what, where, when, why. And you can play it 3 times, 3 different routes, so that you can experience the game in 3 different ways. If you go the balcony route, the gallery route, etc. And as you go through, you can pick and choose on your notes section and deem objects innocent or suspicious or highly suspicious. And you can keep collecting these. And at the end, this is how you will make your deduction. Right? 3 unique paths and stories. Poor Madame X always gets it in the end. She is the unlucky one every single time. So there is a different murder every time. It happens with a different object each time, but Madame X always gets it. So we put the word out, and we got 125 kids who came in period costume for the evening. And if they didn't have it, it was really fun. Another thing about games I would say is have props. Props are pretty great if you're going to bring in audiences that are unsure either of themselves or they're unsure of themselves in a space. We gave out hats and monocles and mustaches, and we didn't have a single one left at the end. They took everything. Girls were wearing mustaches, men were wearing beads. It was quite a raucous night in the Met. They played in teams. So, I want to point out, here's an interesting restriction. The common belief is that every teen is wired. They're all walking around with 2 and 3 and 4 devices. And that is true a lot of times, but it is not a universal truth. And so we did have teens come in who did not own a smartphone. This is New York City. They were brought in. Some of the teens were coming for the very first time. They did get together in teams to look at objects together, and the idea was to be able to look at the device and then really, again, that head-up mode, look at the object and gain and get information from looking. But just remember that, don't make the assumption, have extra devices on hand in your institution. Don't assume that every teen is going to walk in the door with a smart device. At the very end of the evening, the students went back into what we made was a 19th century salon, and they threw chips into some vases, and they voted on their favorite aspects of the work. What really made me happy at the end was that their favorite thing to do was they said that their favorite aspect of the project was examining original works of art, followed by using clues to problem solve, working in teams. Second to last was playing on a mobile game. And to me, that was music to my ears, because it just meant that the experience trumped everything else, and it wasn't all about a device. It was really it went back to everything that Alice wanted to do. She wanted teens to engage with original works of art and have a social experience. Her goal was never to have teens come in the building and use their mobile device. And so I think about this all the time. This project taught me a lot. Just remember that, again, the device is secondary. It's the experience first. So teen event sparks a mobile program. The day after that event, we rolled it out, and now you can play it any time at Met Museum / Madame X Mystery. There were a bunch of adults, of course, in the building that night, and they all wondered why were all these teens getting to play this game, and so we had a separate night for adults that also sold out. And next up, we're on European painting. Okay, sorry, I'm going to run through. Then I'll be very quick. I'll just let you know about these others. So we have 2 other games, more recent, Arms and Armor collection. In honor of the 100th anniversary of the Arms and Armor galleries, we worked with the conservators and curators to think about common myths and misconceptions that they hear in their galleries all the time. And this game was done in a tongue-in-cheek way. The Arms and Armor galleries are what people know. They know these galleries. Some people know these galleries really well. In fact, sometimes, like the Egyptian galleries, these are the 2 collections that they go to over and over and over. But it also is sometimes their very first experience in the museum. And so this iPad or iPhone game, which can also be played online, is a tongue-in-cheek way to let people know about common myths and misconceptions, like how did people in armor go to the bathroom? And it sounds like a funny question, but it's a question that people really have, and there is a real answer. And the answer is, by the way, just like everyone else, because it wasn't a suit of armor; it's pieces of armor that compose an overall suit. People have asked what happens if you have to go to the bathroom on the battlefield, and the curator said, if you are really worried about where you're going to the bathroom in the middle of a battle, believe me, that should be the last worry. You've got other bigger problems. You can we let you share it in social media. You play again, and you can also see an album of the objects that you visited. And the last one is an analog game that was actually run by the Spectrum group at the Metropolitan Museum. And that is a group within the Met that targets post-college. So they, the general audience is like 21 to 39, and it's to offer a unique, engaging, different way to engage with the Met. And so in this night, it was Are You Smarter Than a Curator? It was also a collaboration with Art21. Morgan Holzer actually and Christopher Gorman at the Met organized it with Jonathan Munar. And it's trivia night, and it's a social experience, and people come and they play and they get into groups and they battle it out with the curators who actually have a really good time taking on that evil role of, the evil curator. Where's the Met? In the end, people made really fun names like Show Me the Monet. The Eli Broadz. So the curators didn't win the trivia. You could get points, by the way. Points.
We won, but we got our
Oh.
by 1 point.
Oh my God. That's great. Well, the Eli Broadz won, but we also had teams like Show Me the Monet and Hello Dolly and all of that. But I think this is one of the most interesting points for me was this, that if you didn't just get points for art historical knowledge, they kind of took questions and they found popular culture references. And so the teams, there was a way to get a point for something like, they might even do like in one example they used Kanye West, Jesus, and then they had a painting with Jesus, and you had to know who was the singer of the song and then who was the artist who painted the painting. So there was a way to get points for both kinds of knowledge, and that it wasn't just stacked in favor of a curator. I'll just do them real quick. Listen, work with your contributors. Let your contributors show their strengths. Are they great at development? Are they great at game mechanics? Let them do it. Choose your platform carefully. Know that you can sustain it. Know where your audience will reach it. Listen to your testers and iterate again and again and again. And I say this one all the time, break tradition while staying on mission. Know who your institution is. This is not right for everybody, but this felt right for me at the Met. These games felt right. So education is part of our mission. I feel good about changing things up, but still being true to who the Met is. And just in the future, I'm thinking a lot about kids and games, and I'll be working on a whole kids-based website with games. So I'll leave you with this thought. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Thank you.
Tweet that, everybody. So I just want to sort of give you an update that I'm going to present now for hopefully just 10 minutes. And then for the last 20 minutes, we'll do an interactive component where we'll ask you guys all to think about making games too. So please stay. So I work at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which was founded in 1929 and has a long history of education programs and a commitment to working with audiences beyond the walls of the institution, including, we also have a history of working with new media to reach a broader audience, like in 1952 and 1953, when MoMA co-produced a TV series called Through the Enchanted Gate, which was a family art-making television series. And there were also printed guides that helped families participate at home, and kids could submit their artwork to the show. Today, we continue to develop programs and resources for family audiences to help them understand modern and contemporary art. And resources developed are meant to be used both in the museum and at home, and are produced in a variety of formats, from websites to hands-on spaces to retail products. And like our colleagues before us in 2010, we decided to use what was then a new technology to develop an educational resource that would meet kids where they were. So we made an app for iPads. And our primary target audience was kids ages 7 and up, as well as creative adults. And our goals were for kids and adults to find inspiration and new ways of connecting with MoMA's collection through activity-based explorations of artwork, basic tools for art making, and prompts to help spark creativity. And I should say that our app isn't really a game. It's more of a creative play app, that we had an initial conversation about whether activities should be more game-like, and we just felt like it wasn't the right fit for our content, and it wasn't really right to sort of gamify our content, that we kind of decided to let that speak for itself. So despite being on this games panel, this isn't really a game. So, Kellian talked a lot about resources, restrictions, and goals. I shared our goals with you. And as far as resources go, one thing that we did have was we had a lot of experience developing content and resources for kids. And so we have these hands-on spaces at the museum, and we decided to use them as the sort of source of content for the app that we thought about. All right, we've seen kids doing, and adults, interacting in these certain ways with these activities that we have in the lab spaces. How can we create that in a digital format? How can we sort of translate those successes to a different platform? So the spaces are all themed, because we are obsessed with themes in the education department at MoMA, and that the themes were color, line, and shape, some of the fundamental building blocks of art, and these were in spaces that took place between 2008 and 2010 at the museum. The program continues, but this was 2010, so it was all that we'd had. And in the lab really gave visitors an opportunity to experiment, play, and create with a variety of materials and to make connections to the collection. And in this slide, you can see here that visitors were encouraged to play with geometric, organic, and three-dimensional shapes to experiment with design, composition, and representation. And visitors could play as they wished, or if they needed, there were prompts. You can see either visual prompts or written prompts to help spark their creativity. And it was really amazing how these simple activities spark creativity in both kids and adults. And it became apparent that the activities were successful because they were open-ended and intuitive. And as a result, creating compositions using shapes became the main concept for the main canvas of our app. And once we had our content in mind, we had to figure out how to realize the project, of course. So we originally wanted to make an app for each lab. We thought that we'd have one for line, one for color, and one for shape. And then we decided to combine all of our ideas into one app. And thank goodness we did. It would have been a nightmare to have had 3 different apps that we had to maintain and that we had to produce and promote, too, that we didn't have a budget for marketing within our budget. And so that was a challenge that we then had to face too. How are you promoting this app when you don't really have any money to be promoting the app? And we also needed to identify what platform to use as well. We decided that we're creating this app. We ended up choosing an iPad because we felt like the larger screen would really help kids, have more space to do activities, and would also optimize the artworks that you would see. And that was a restriction that we ended up accepting too. That we knew we wouldn't reach as large of an audience as we would with a phone app, but that was a restriction that we were sort of okay with having. And so I am going to show you a video to give you a sense of the app that David Hart, who's here, helped make. I hope I'm going to show you a video. Here. Okay.
The new MoMA Art Lab app for the iPad inspires creative play and invites a closer look at works from the Museum of Modern Art's collection. Play with shapes, lines, and colors. Create something. Make a design, draw, or just experiment. Check out the Ideas section for some extra inspiration. You can do more than make art with MoMA Art Lab. Explore the artwork and process of artists like Elizabeth Murray and Henri Matisse through fun activities. Make sound poems, bend, drop, down. Chance collages. Group drawings, and more. Save artwork in your gallery and share it with friends and family. MoMA Art Lab, inspiring all ages and available now in the App Store.
David does a great job, and does a great job of picking great music, too. All right, let me switch back. Just 1 second. We'll go full screen. Okay, cool. So as you saw, the main canvas is a suite of tools where people can layer shapes, lines, and colors and experiment with scale, composition, layering, and color. Also, down here that we have having a digital gave us an unlimited amount of storage for shapes and colors, so that then there became an endless combination that kids could do. So that was really an affordance that going digital, gave us. Then we also had prompts to encourage creativity, just like in the labs. And then we have 9 different activities in which users can use to explore work and process of artists in the collection. And the activities all relate to the line, shape, and color themes that are underscored in the app. And we aim to use a range of artwork in the collection from, masterpieces like, works by Matisse to, to the work of contemporary artists like Jim Lambie. And we tried to have activities that appeal to different kinds of learners as well. And we wanted to have these activities be things that people could do multiple times, right? Because this is an app that you're going to use at home. We wanted it to be something that people could come back to again and again. And I think we had some more success with some activities than with others on that too. Like this Jim Lambie create a line design tape installation one is really addicting. Even for grown-ups, it's super fun to do. But then there are other ones, maybe like creating a chance collage that, you do a couple of times and then maybe you don't need to do anymore. But what we really liked about that one is that you're using actually the functionality of the iPad too. So when you're making a chance collage, you're shaking the iPad. In order to create your chance collage. And then there are also sharing functionalities too, that users can share what they make via email and Twitter. We would love to have had Facebook and I don't think there was Instagram at the time. But we would love to have other sharing features too, but because this is for kids and some of those have age restrictions, that was a restriction that we had too. So you can only share that way. But you can also share with MoMA too. And for us, it's really great because it gives us a sense of what people are doing with the app. Since this is something that's in people's homes, of course we did some user testing, but we're not sure now how people are using it exactly. And so based on what we receive, it really helps us get a sense of what people are doing. And it seems like people are using shape, line, and color in creative ways. And I'm going to share with you some of the a small selection of what we've seen. So here is a 10-year-old from Mexico City who is doing some interesting layering. And a 32-year-old from LA experimenting with line. There's something that reminds me of like highways with this one too, but maybe I'm reading into that. This is Leo, who's 5 from Brooklyn. And this is Diane, who's 70 years old from Smithsonian, New York, who's trying the Jim Lambie tape installation activity. And here are some surreal collaborations using the Exquisite Corpse activity. This one was submitted by Charlie, who's 4 and lives in Brooklyn. And Allegra also always likes to tell the story that it's like Charlie and his mom, and it's 5 o'clock, and his mom is ready for a cocktail. And that this is, their collaboration. And then here we have, who is that? That is Brian and Nora from Sausalito, California, who made an interesting giraffe who might be. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, a weird giraffe fish kind of character. And this is our most prolific contributor, Richard, who's 85 and lives in Syracuse, New York. We followed him to Santa Fe, you can see there, where he used the app like a sketchbook, and we've seen him refer to artists like Manet in some of his submissions. And we're really curious to know more about him. He submitted so many works to us. And Maggie Lederer, who works in our digital media department at the museum, wrote a blog post recently looking for Richard, but he still hasn't shown himself. So we were joking about how are we going to find him? What do we do? Do we have to go to Syracuse and put out an ad? Because we're really interested why he's using our app. There are better drawing apps out there, but why is he using our app to create? And is it because it's really important for him to be sharing with MoMA? We're not sure. But for now, it'll have to be a mystery whether these are self-portraits or not. I don't know. So I just wanted to tell you a couple other things that I thought that this sort of group might be interested in. That we created an update for the app last summer that we originally planned for 9 activities, and then we didn't have time or budget to do them all. And so last summer, we created 3 new activities that you saw. It was Create a Mobile, Create a Line Design, and maybe something with Gorky, but I can't totally remember. But that wasn't something that we originally budgeted for. I think affordance, right, was that a resource, was that we did have a budget, which was pretty great, but we weren't able to build in for updates or for maintenance, which is something that I would encourage everybody to do when making an app, to build that into your initial budget, because now whenever there's an iOS update, we're sort of scraping to make it happen, to sort of like maintain our commitment to this app. And I also want to talk briefly about pricing. That all of our programs for families at the museum are free, but with this app we had an institutional expectation to make back the money that we spent on it. So we weren't really sure what to do and felt kind of uncomfortable charging families because we don't usually for them to come to our programs. And so, we kind of looked to see what was out there. We decided to price our app at $4.99, which proved to just be too high for the marketplace. So we eventually lowered it for $2.99, which was better. We just felt like we had all this content, we were going to add to it, but it was just too much money. And recently, the museum decided to make the app available for free, which is awesome. And they just decided that there was more potential impact for it to be widely accessible than it was to be worrying about revenue from individual downloads. So here you can see a graph of what happened when we made it free. So we went from tens of downloads a day to the hundreds. Though after that, you can see the spike died down, that it was on October 25th, right? It was when we went free. And to give you some numbers, we've had 47,882 downloads so far through this past Sunday. And the day we went free, we only had 16,111. So that was about 30,000 downloads in 3 weeks that we were able to gain by making it free. So that's a big message, and I'm, as an educator, I'm just excited that we're able to reach so many more people. And we hope that you guys will download it and give us feedback too, because one thing I didn't mention was that when we started this, we did a lot of research, and there weren't that many apps for families in the marketplace. We decided to make something for at home. I know SF MoMA has one for kids in the galleries, but there wasn't that much out there for families, and so I'd love to continue the conversation with those of you who are developing those projects. Do I have 5 more minutes? 2 more minutes? Yeah, 2 more minutes? 5 more Okay, cool. Good. Okay, so since this project that I talked about is more of a creative play app than a game, I also wanted to let you know about 2 projects at MoMA that we've done that are more game-based, but they are analog games. And we've created them to encourage visitors to discover MoMA in new, creative, and social ways. The first project is a gallery game based on bingo that encourages visitors to search for materials in the museum's collection. As in bingo, the first to get 5 in a row won, and we made temporary tattoos to give them away, although they weren't as cool as these Tatley ones that we got. And material bingo was conceived by my colleague Stephanie Powell, who's right over there on the stripe, step back there, and designed so that families who visited our 4th interactive space, which was all about materials, could have a way to continue their visit and continue thinking about this idea of materials in the galleries, though it's used by people of all ages. And here you can see some high school students looking closely for materials in a Robert Rauschenberg painting. And I think this image really illustrates how material bingo is a good example of how a game can be used to bring together close looking and a social experience in the galleries as well. And then this is the last project that I'll talk about. This past summer, Stephanie, Sarah, myself, and 2 other colleagues collaborated with the 3 other colleagues collaborated with the Institute of Play to create a game for visitors in their 20s and 30s. That was one of our goals. And it's called Everyone's a Critic, as you can see. And our goals were to create a fun and social way for visitors to explore the galleries that encourage them to look closely at works of art. The game is loosely based on Apples to Apples, and for those of you who don't know, it's a card-based party game. I had to Wikipedia it. They said it's a party game. That, wherein players have to match descriptive or adjectives to selective noun cards. And then they have to argue for which is the best match. So in our game, it invites visitors to assume the roles of artists or critic. And the critic picks a theme, and then the artists have to find works of art in that gallery that relate to the theme, and then argue for why it works. And some of you who are at the game workshop, we had people play it to test it out. So some of you are familiar with that. And our hope is that visitors are looking closely at works of art and thinking about the collection in new ways when they're playing this game. So in addition to this 3-player version, we also have a 2-player, because we know from research that most visitors, are coming to the museum in pairs. And so even though we liked the 3-player version a lot, we really felt like it was important to have a 2-player version as well, because we needed to be real about how our audience was who our audience was and how they were coming to the museum. And we've started to put the game out only recently, and we're really interested to see how visitors use it. One thing that we learned from testing is that not everyone wants to play games, and that's okay too. But so, we're hoping to just engage the small percentage of people who do, and to create a different kind of museum experience for them. And for both of these projects, we just found that it was more flexible and cheaper to use paper as opposed to creating a digital game. But we have had conversations about creating a digital version of these projects. What would it look like? And there are things that even, they're both pretty broad, that there are things that people could play at other object-based institutions as well. But I do think we need to figure out how people are using them first, before we're going to invest the money to make, and the time and the resources to make them digital projects. How are people using them? Are enough people using them for us to, for MoMA to find money to produce them? And then going forward, I'm really interested in what kinds of digital experiences we should or can provide for families in the galleries, and what kind of experiences can we come up with that involve close looking, and maybe a mobile device. Is that possible, or is that incongruous? That I know a lot of you have heard about the MoMA Audio Plus app at this conference, and I'm interested in day 3, and how we might be able to harness some of that amazing app for family audiences in the galleries, thinking about potential games too.
All right. Shall we?
Yeah.